Shadowlands beta is upon us, but I am not invited. So instead, today we're going to talk about the state of Mythic Plus dungeons, systems, and what I very much hope will change for them over time in Shadowlands and beyond. Let's talk about it. In this video, I did not want to rehash the latest Shadowlands Mythic Plus news or speculate on whether volcanic and bursting affixes had to be changed or not. Instead, I wanted to talk to you about how Mythic Plus content is positioned and tuned in the game for an average casual player, as the crowd of people who I belong to and feel like I represent as the content creator. In short, Mythic Plus dungeons need to stop being the only casually accessible source of decent item level rewards. And those item levels need to better reflect the difficulty any player has to deal with in order to win them. It is all about the loot in WoW. Eye level is the king or queen of them all, depending how you would like to look at it. Yes, we do a lot of things for fun, of course, but in the end, we need a reward we work for, always. Beyond the initial 1 or 2 fun runs, perhaps through any new content that they throw at us. Fun is fun, but it's even more fun if we get something for putting in the effort. It's as simple as that. And I believe that currently Mythic Plus are way too hard for a casual player who needs the ways to progress their power to deal with any other solo-friendly content that Blizzard put in front of us in the game. Currently, in BFA patch 8.3, before Shadowlands launches, the best example is in pushing Horrific Visions solo. The system is genuinely fantastic, as it offers solo progression for people who don't want to deal with the others. Yes, it's an MMORPG, I hear you. But there are many people in WoW who prefer to play alone and interact with the others only in passing, or just to see a crowd in the city, but not necessarily want to group up together to tackle some challenges as the only real method of getting the loot. So Horrific Visions are offering us some loot, which is great, and which is not something that Torghast, as the closest comparable solo experience in the future, will do anymore by the looks of it. Horrific Visions aren't offering us any weapons, rings or trinkets, however. Blizzard funnels us into other content if we want those pieces, to push our overall power higher. So that's where Mythic Plus gearing option comes in. The experience that's suited solo casuals who have found their happy niche in WoW becomes suddenly broken. And I still can't believe that Blizzard thinks it's a good thing or the right game design. A casual solo player with the gear obtainable from world quests, heroic dungeons, LFR and some lower brackets of Horrific Visions right now, at least in 8.3, can realistically get into Mythic Plus dungeons up to maybe a level 6 plus 6, if they are both resilient and lucky. M plus 6 gives currently, before Shadowlands, a 4/4 item level piece at the end of the dungeon and a 4/5/5 item in a weekly chest. 4/5/5 is actually nice for a solo casual, there is no question about it. And sure, if you do enough of those M plus runs, you'll have enough gear to push a little higher into M plus 7, M plus 8 and maybe beyond. The process of getting that gear, however, is usually quite painful, heavily randomized, as the right piece of loot you're after isn't promised to you, and your experience of getting into groups, interacting with random people, and completing the dungeon before your hair goes grey may and will vary significantly. The biggest issue of M+, is that it's dungeon content, which is primarily dependent on your ability to interact socially and enjoy the process. Hear me out here. Dungeons and group content are core of MMORPG gameplay, and World of Warcraft is not an exception. I'm not insane enough to pitch here for removal or substantial change of that factor. Dungeons are dungeons, and a lot of people love them, and I am not a real exception here either. I am, however, trying to not shy away here from pointing out a few elements that are taken as is or for granted more or less by the players, and not necessarily consciously seen as something that makes that content much harder for a casual. It's not just how hard the mobs hit you or how difficult boss mechanics might be. It's the fact that you, regardless of your personality, role and gear, you were lucky enough to obtain before stepping foot into any of those M+ dungeons. You will have to enter and successfully emerge from those social group experiences. That's what I'm talking about. There are several steps involved in that too. Like, first step, either be confident enough to create your own group or apply for someone else's listed M+ group. Second, you would have to deal with the mental, let's call it random roll, of what kind of people you are about to commit to interacting with for the next 20 to 30 minutes, sometimes fairly intensely, depending on how high in M+ content you're pushing. Step number 3, you would have to inevitably do your job well enough not to be yelled at as a low output DPS, or just to feel like, you're not letting people down as a healer or a tank. And finally, you would need to be lucky enough to make it worth your while at the end of the day by getting the item or items that you were after in the first place. Unless you were in fact doing it just for fun, which I'm sure a lot of players do, but the vast majority of people enter these groups to get the loot and then get the hell out of there. So, for example, dropping a few of those steps, such as the need to manually or socially interact when you're just getting into those groups, for example, dropping those steps would already simplify this content and make it a lot more accessible, making the lives of casuals much better. This is a change that I'd love to see for Mythic Plus content. I mean, what's the real issue with simply applying clearly advertised eye-level brackets that would allow you to auto-queue for Mythic Plus if you are fitting into that bracket of item levels to queue for a specific range of M+. I understand that some people might take their pushing of M+ keys very seriously, but nothing prevents them from having their own custom, possibly guild or friends-filled groups, right? I mean, we could still leave that option in. But for majority of average Joes and Janes like me, an auto-grouping system, most likely an extension of already existing LFGE1, should be perfectly suitable and reducing all sorts of anxiety and initial barrier of getting into Mythic Plus. Then, that number of Mythic Plus challenges a casual player perceives and would need to tackle, they reduce dramatically. But not necessarily trivializing the challenge altogether, I don't think so. You still need to coordinate, you still need to talk with people, you still need to follow your tank, you still need to dish out the damage and make sure that you know the boss fights. And before you tell me, yes, but right now manual group assembly allows you to vet out people who have no idea what they're doing. I will ask you, really? You really think so? Unless you invite people who vastly overgear the content, or who you personally know and ran dungeons with in the past, you actually, my friend, have no idea who you're grouping with. Automatically or manually, it plays no significant role, at the very least no significant role for 99% of player base. It makes no difference. It only serves as an unnecessary social barrier that needs to be removed from Mythic Plus, especially as there's already an in-game LFG system that could be easily expanded to include those new Mythic Plus brackets. I am not a Mythic Plus player, as in I do prefer solo content, as you know, guys, which is why the Horrific Visions of 8.3, in my opinion, were the best solo and casual friendly addition to this game since probably, I don't know, artifact quest lines of Legion expansion. I mentioned Mythic Plus in my casual friendly and rather easy gearing guide for patch 8.3 as the primary source of the key element of your gearing progression. And it's your weapons, my friend. Lovely Blizzard has done a lot of things for us as the players of the game, but they didn't give us many opportunities to arm ourselves outside of Mythic Plus. There is LFR and general raiding that requires even higher levels of organization actually, as instead of dealing with 4 other random people, you have to deal with 20 plus. And given that the other content that you need to feel some progression in, to feel somewhat motivated to stay in the game, such as clearing Horrific Visions solo for me, for example, it requires higher levels of toughness and damage output from you, which in turn both heavily depends on your item level. No, I'm not going to weave in here corruption effects into this narrative, as random factors are random factors and temporary systems are temporary systems. We're talking about the future. You have no choice but to seek those opportunities to obtain better weapons and trinkets mainly from whichever sources are available to you. This is exactly how we, solo casual players, end up pushing ourselves into Mythic Plus. Blizzard says on every corner these days that they want to build and promote player agency. Let us play how we want to play and get out of our way. So why am I not seeing then added options to get gear from the sources other than Mythic Plus and raiding? I've prepared and recorded this narrative before Shadowlands launched, and I am not invited into beta, which is unfortunate, so my opinion might change as I play the expansion, and I invite you to subscribe and show your support and stay tuned for further updates from me on this and other topics. But at the moment, from everything that I've seen and heard about Shadowlands, I did not see any substantial alternative sources for solo casual player friendly methods of obtaining this loot, or namely the weapons, if we had to remain specific. So in any way other than basically once again engage in the rather daunting and often unrewarding experience of Mythic Plus. Torghast becomes more and more a fun type of experience by the sound of it, at the very least, as we are following sort of revelations of other channels about Shadowlands Alpha and Beta. It sounds like Torghast at best would give us only some cosmetics. Again, I am writing it before I get into Beta, if ever, and before Shadowlands launched. Things might be very different when you're watching and listening to this. Crafting legendaries seems to be restricted to only one equipped item at one time, and it does not include weapons once again. World quest system seems unchanged largely, and will probably follow the same general philosophy of being restricted to number of gearing options that you have per day and week, with weapons being very rare and usually capped somewhere at a decent but not exciting item level that will not impact your solo progression in the end game. You know what I mean? Like 445 emissary chest weapons are these days in BFA patch 8.3. There are probably and hopefully going to be some extra options from mission table evolution, the adventures minigame perhaps, but even if those offer us gear like garrison missions did, I doubt that those would be actually weapons, and I can almost guarantee that even if they are weapons, but they will never exceed the item level of what you can get from world quests and emissaries, or whatever replaces emissary chests. Blizzard says that they want player agency and they want us to have fun our own way. Yet they think that they know better what's good for you and I. That is my main and probably only issue with them. They basically say, you want something better than those blues that you got from world quests? Go into dungeons and raids, as we think that that's what's good for you. And it's what all of our players should be doing if they want better gear. The rest of the theme park spread out around those Mythic Plus dungeons and raids is just to make sure that you stay in the theme park and eventually get funneled into those experiences they've designed and designated as the only sources of something that will help you in your solo adventures beyond a certain mediocre performance point. They don't let the systems spread far and wide with their own truly alternative gearing progression systems. You'll still have to come back to Mythic Plus when you feel like you've hit a brick wall of difficulty somewhere and need to push further just to have fun. So all in all, I think the difficulty of Mythic Plus is not aligned with the rewards we get now and beyond. One has to go against their own grain to maybe get a weapon that will be of the same item level as your emissary chest rewards, except you had to sweat for it through a potentially toxic group of people who have their own standards of social interaction and expectations they set on their teammates. I am looking forward to Shadowlands, but I am disappointed by the open agenda item level gear removal from Torghast, as the closest experience that I saw to the horrific visions, comparable to horrific visions that have entertained me in World of Warcraft for the past 6 months or so. And I hope that at least they'll raise the item level of those Mythic Plus rewards to encourage casuals like me to push themselves through those vastly more challenging experiences in order to feel that the actual discomfort a lot of us feel in Mythic Plus dungeons was justified in the end. And these are my thoughts on Mythic Plus dungeons, my friends. I very much hope that if you don't even agree with me, that you will support the channel by subscribing, by participating in the conversation in the comments down below. Tell me how you feel. Are you happy with the state of Mythic Plus right now in 8.3 before Shadowlands launches? If you're watching this from the future, and if you're already in Shadowlands, or maybe in beta if you're one of the lucky ones, tell me if Mythic Plus feels any different to what I've just reflected as my casual perception of how I see the difficulty, the social barriers and inability to automatically queue for Mythic Plus as issues that are pushing away us, casuals, solo players, predominantly solo players, away from this really only stream of certain gearing options, certain content that we kind of don't have a choice but to pursue somehow if we want to stay in this game and remain relevant and remain interested in the game. Tell me how you feel about this. I really appreciate you stopping by, and if you listened through the whole lot, wow, I'm impressed. Please hit the like button if you liked the video and tell me in the comments down below how you feel about the whole lot of this stuff. I will talk to you in a couple of days' time, and for now I'm gonna say goodbye. Gyro, signing off.